Crusaders 2019 season preview. First time I got the Crusaders jersey on in a video. As a Blues guy, it feels kind of wrong, but as I look at myself in the little viewfinder thingy, red looks good. So how are the Crusaders going to go this year? Looking at this piece of paper of mine, I reckon they're going to go pretty darn well because it's a very strong looking squad. The changes that they've made aren't ones that I think are going to be all that detrimental, and the schedule actually looks fairly favourable. So we'll have a look at the squad, who's gone, who's still there, and the fixtures list, and you guys can let me know your thoughts at the end. In terms of players who have left, there's not really any that I would be that kind of upset about. Wyatt Crockett finishing Super Rugby. He's a legend. He's getting on. Could have kept playing, but he wasn't first choice. He didn't even start in the final, so that shows you how strong the Crusaders are at in terms of their propping stocks. Pete Samu's gone to the Brumbies, but again, he was a very useful player, but not frontline for the Crusaders. If everyone's fit, Pete Samu is probably at best on the bench. Mike Delaney has gone to Bay of Plenty, back to Bay of Plenty. No, not Super Rugby this year. Again, at his age, it's probably appropriate. Seta Tamani Valu is probably the biggest loss. He's gone over to France. Useful guy to have in the midfield or on the wing, but there's just so much talent in that Crusaders team that I don't think they're going to skip a beat without him. So, who's left? Props: Michael Alaalatoa, Harry Allen, Owen Franks, Ollie Jaeger, Joe Moody, and Tim Perry. So, a fair few All Blacks there. What Alaalatoa does with his international career is still one that remains to be seen. I believe he's All Blacks eligible now, but he doesn't seem to be quite at that selection level. Again, he's not usually the starting guy for the Crusaders, but he's still a very useful player. Moody's an All Black, Perry's an All Black, Franks is a long-serving All Black, so the scrum's going to be good. Hookers, Ben Fennell, Makaleo, and Taylor. Again, how much talent is that? All three guys, top class. Locks: Scott Barrett, Romano, Strange, Whitelock. These names sound familiar, right? Because they are. Loose forwards: Ethan Blackadder, who we saw a bit of last season, very useful player, up-and-comer. Mitchell Dunshea, Billy Harmon, Tom Sanders, Jordan Talfua, who is signed to leave, I believe, at the end of the season. Matt Todd, Fetu Douglas, and Kieran Reid. Fetu Douglas is the only new name in that bunch. He's the only new signing, and he's a re-signing because he left the Crusaders to play in Italy, and now he's back. So, how many of those players were new? Just him. It's all the same guys from last year, minus Samu and a few of the other kind of bit part players who were in there for the most part when the Crusaders had injuries, especially at the start of the season, and a couple at the end. But yeah, it's one new guy, and that same forward pack that dominated Super Rugby last year. If anything, it's going to get better because some of the young guys will have improved with an experience, of one campaign under the belt. So that's ominous. And the Blues have got the Crusaders in week 1. Anyway, backs: scrum halves, Drummond, Inari, and Hall. Hall and Drummond were the main guys last year. I think Inari was injured, but don't quote me on that. 10s, you got Brett Cameron, Mitch Hunt, and Richie Mo'unga. Mo'unga was that good last year that, half the country was saying that he needs to be playing 10 for the All Blacks. He did get a bit of time in black last season, which was good. Midfielders: Bateman, Crotty, and Goodhue. I suppose that's a bit light, but there are other guys in the team who can also play in the midfield. Outside backs: George Bridge, Enor, Whainganukunuku, Will Jordan, Mataele, Punivai, Dag, and Havili. Dag, I believe, is still doubtful as to whether he's going to play. I saw he's got some kind of long-term injury going. Will Jordan I don't think he got a single game last season for the Crusaders. But at Mitre 10 level, he absolutely cuts teams to bits. The fact that he doesn't get any time at Super Rugby, at least last year, shows you how much depth is in that Crusaders team. It's ridiculous. Any other team he gets played, if not off the bench, then starting. There's definitely something as a coach to be said for not dropping guys in the deep end. It's perhaps better to get a year at Mitre 10 level where you are really comfortable instead of going in and perhaps getting your confidence knocked at Super Rugby level. But realistically, for the Crusaders, how often are you going to get your confidence knocked? Not that many times. There's that many good guys around you to support you that you're probably going to be fine. George Bridge was fantastic. I've had my doubts about him in the past. That same logic that, hey man, he's good, but the Crusaders being so good make him look great. But then he does sometimes things that I think, no, he is just really good. Enor's another one. When he's come on, he's often a bit of a depth man, but when he comes on, he just looks fantastic. So there's not too many changes in those backline players either, but there are a few more than in the forwards. But for the most part, it is that same dominant Crusaders team from last year. Last year, they finished first overall. They won all their playoff games, won Super Rugby. 14 wins and 2 losses. They had 2 losses early on in the season. I think they went, at one point they were 2 losses with 2 wins, so they were 50-50. For the rest of the season, didn't drop a game and didn't really look like dropping games. I mean, they had a couple of lackluster performances against the Sunwolves. I think it was against the Brumbies away, and the Waratahs gave them a bit of a scare, but they did well to come back, even if that game had a bit of controversy in it. But yeah, they didn't really look like getting beaten last year. At home, no team's invincible, but they look pretty darn close. I mean, again, it was the Waratahs that were the only ones that really gave them a scare down in Christchurch. It's really a shame they don't have a stadium to do that team justice, because they deserve a top-class stadium for that top-class team. Any of you guys down in Christchurch have to tell me how much that affects you going to the game. Because from what I've heard, it's really windy. And yeah, if it's a cold winter's night and it's raining, you don't really want to be getting wind blowing you away as well. But anyway, fixtures list is the Blues away, like I mentioned in week 1. Hurricanes at home, Reds away, and Chiefs at home, followed up by Highlanders away. So of their starting 5 games, 4 of them are up against New Zealand teams. So they get all the other New Zealand Conference teams halfway done by the 5th week. A trip to Brisbane in the middle of that. I suppose the fact that they've got the Chiefs and the Hurricanes at home to start off with is a plus, because psychologically you'd like to get a win over those guys, especially the Hurricanes, who beat them, one of the teams that beat them last year. But the trip against the Highlanders in week 5 will be an interesting one, because again, that's the only other place they lost. They only lost in Wellington and they lost in Dunedin. So they'll be looking for a bit of revenge down there. But man, imagine if they beat all 4 New Zealand teams in those opening 5 games. They'll be favourites by a mile, and psychologically, again, it'll be pretty good for them. Waratahs away in week 6, Hurricanes away in week 7, Brumbies home, Highlanders home in weeks 8 and 9. So it's a pretty full-on start to the schedule. But I mentioned this in another video, that I do like that setup. That they've got a long stretch of 9 games. You get the guys into the rhythm. They got no trips to South Africa to disrupt that. It's all pretty much local. No trips to Japan, no trips to Argentina. It's all contained within Australia and New Zealand. And it's a nice run of 9 games before they get a bye in week 10, which is probably a very good time to have a bye. Guys maybe just starting to get a bit tired. You picked up a few injuries. Time for a rest. Then they got the Lions and the Sharks at home in weeks 11 and 12. Then they got their trip to South Africa in weeks 13 and 14. So that's the Bulls and the Stormers away, which I guess one's at altitude, one's not, so it could be worse. Blues at home in week 15, then they got a trip to Fiji in week 16. So they don't have to go to Hamilton, which again is probably a plus, because it's an away game for them, but it's in Fiji, so it's kind of a neutral ground. And then the Rebels at home in week 17. They are the team which has the bye in week 18. It's a guaranteed thing that the Crusaders are going to be qualified for the playoffs. So having a bye in week 18 is very welcome for them. Gives them perfect time to get the guys rested and fresh. It's possible that other teams will have to be traveling to them. So, I mean, if anything, there's a slight risk of being rusty, but I can't imagine it being an issue for the Crusaders. They should be raring to go for that first playoff match after having a bye. The two teams they avoid, interestingly, are the Sunwolves and the Jaguares. So they avoid a extra bit of trip with travel to Japan or Argentina. So I think that's pretty favourable. I mean, you might say I'd rather be playing the Sunwolves because they're going to be an easy team to beat. Perhaps. They do have a stronger squad this year, but I think in terms of travel, the Crusaders have done pretty well with their fixtures list and the bye placement. I mean, if the Blues had a bye in week 18, it would just be a waste of time because they're probably already going to be out. But for the Crusaders, I think that's kind of perfect timing. There's not that many questions I have about the Crusaders this year. There's not that many issues. You look at it and go, how's that going to be affected? I mean, I would ask, are some of the young guys actually going to get a chance this year? And I would say probably yes, because being a World Cup year, they're going to have to rest some of their All Blacks. So we should see the likes of Will Jordan and co actually get a run. Because some of the top guns are going to need to be rested for the World Cup. If there's any weakness about the Crusaders is that they've got so many All Blacks that the rest periods may affect them more. But their depth, I believe, handles it pretty well. You put Fetu Douglas in for Kieran Reid and I think you're fine. He showed that he's a top-class player. So, yeah, I think the young guys will get a chance. I think they'll handle the All Black breaks pretty well. Can they get wins in Wellington and Dunedin? Those are the only things that they would look to improve on for last season. Otherwise, it was essentially a perfect season. So if they can get wins there, even better. And will they get beaten? I mean, everybody has an off day, but the thing about the Crusaders is they're a class team that even when they're not playing at their best, they find a way to beat you. It's just what they do. They're well coached, they got good depth, they're mentally very strong, so they are going to be a hard team to beat for anybody. If anybody does beat them, kudos to them, because I mean, I look at this lineup now and I can't see it really happening, even though I know there's a lot of other strong teams in Super Rugby, but the fact that they've got so few changes makes me think that it's going to take the Crusaders having an off day and somebody else having a blinder for it to happen. But the bookies back me up. They've got the Crusaders the top favourites. No surprises there, based on the squad, based on the history. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts on the Crusader season for 2019. How do you think they're going to go? Do you think anyone, if anyone is their main threat, who do you think it is? Can you see them getting beaten, especially at home? Seems like a bit of a stretch for me, but yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts and I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.